So, welcome, lovely souls. Thank you for listening to the Voice podcast, the voice of integrity and compassion and empathy. I have the wonderful guest, Claire Thomas, again with me, who is the professional vampire, the phlebotomist. I said it. I managed to say. And we had a beautiful, really interesting discussion about chronic fatigue and her journey to how she's navigated through that and was told by a doctor, basically, that's it, you lumped with it, get on with her life. But she completely turned that one upside down. And it was just such a lovely conversation that I wanted to bring Claire back to discuss kidneys, bladder, the adrenal glands that sit above the kidneys, and how this will interlink with chronic fatigue. But because we are recording this currently now, which is in winter relates to the kidney health in Chinese medicine. It's this natural flow that each organ has a body clock of time of day, month, and season. So we're deeply and heavily in the kidney energy right now. And I want to explore that in terms of how this will be coming up as a physical symptom, and mentally as well, and what we can do to support our kidney health. And from you, Claire, how you can share from your perspective on how you see that and how you can support and how you do support people with your clinic and the work that you do. So, hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So what I want to do, I'll open it up and I'll say that the kidneys are, for me and from the perspective of, it's the water energy that is the key force of energy that sits within our willpower. It's that deep part of us, that essence of life. And it's connected down through, from my perspective, to the base chakra. It's about our connection to earth. It's our survival patterning, but it's also really key for our thriving as well. So, and when we're heavily in fear, in survival, we're living in a very contracted perspective, and the body will constrict and live purely on that fight, flight, survival patterning.
Yeah.
And it's recognizing that and how we can move through those patterns, because it can become so constricted in our heads that we don't even realize we're in it.
Completely. Yes, it's how we reconnect with our bodies again and understand sort of how some of these survival mechanisms, whilst they're keeping us safe, or we feel they're keeping us safe, actually the impact it can have on our bodies as a consequence. So I think sometimes, when we can, I think you've got to feel safe to do it. It's taking that step back and being able to sort of see the bigger picture and go, right, what little things can I do to sort of support my body, support my health? And as we've said, at the moment, we're looking at the kidneys and the adrenals, which obviously the main production of cortisol is had. So it's I think looking at that in more depth.
Yeah. So from your perspective, what sort of symptoms would someone present to you which would make you think, okay, what's happening here, possibly from a kidney? I don't know if you look at it from that level initially, but when
I have a client come to me, unless it's something that I would actually say, look, that needs to have a medical professional look at it, like burning when you're going to the toilet. Frequency can sometimes be related to looking at maybe the potential of diabetes. There's perhaps pain in the lower back that could be suggestive of kidney issues. So unless somebody comes to me and we're sort of talking through their symptoms and they're giving me physical symptoms that I'm like, actually, we probably do need to consider. I mean, even things like blood pressure. What's your blood pressure doing? If your blood pressure's raised, what's going on there? So I never specifically look at the kidneys from that point of view. Obviously, when I get blood test results back and I can see what's going on with the markers within the kidney health, that is obviously going to highlight any areas that perhaps we need to work on or needs referral back to a medical professional. But generally, the kind of more that I look at with my clients is the stress response. And so looking at that sort of adrenal health, because that will have an impact. So just for example, if you're in chronic stress, one mechanism is something called vasoconstriction. So that's where blood vessels will constrict, so they'll get smaller, and blood flow will be directed to what's considered more important. So think brain, heart, muscles, lungs, because that's what you need to ideally run away from the situation that you find yourself in. Kidneys are seen as less important in that moment. Same with digestion. You know, we don't get as much blood flow to those areas in that point. So if you think about it, you've then got vasoconstriction in the kidneys, and the main thing of the kidneys is filtration. You've then got less filtration happening. Think of, narrowing pipes. Then you're not going to get the sort of flush through and the ability for the body to, as you hydrate, to be able to flush through into the bladder, then out into the outside
So
world.
the body's not basically being able to release and to let go.
Yes.
It's so often UTIs regular UTIs come up.
Regular UTIs. If somebody, though, it could be a kidney issue or sometimes a heart issue if you're getting lots of edema, so lots of swelling. If I see somebody, especially around the ankles, sometimes that could be a cardiovascular problem, but it's sometimes looking at, okay, what are the kidneys doing as well? So it's all these little things that sometimes you sort of pin together. But again, I can't diagnose. So it's very much just looking at the symptoms and going, based on what I see, I think we need to go and speak to a medical professional.
No, definitely. And what would the markers be that you said you were doing your blood test? What would the markers come up that would make you think,
Okay, so we're looking at things like your creatinine, glomerular filtration rate, and urea. So these are just showing us how well your kidneys are filtrating, how well they're removing the toxins from the system. And then I'd also be looking at things like your CRP, which is your, I totally forgot the C is, it's a reactive protein. The C's gone out of my head, but it's an inflammatory marker. So if I see someone with high levels of inflammation, again, that can sometimes be due to a chronic stress picture as well. So it's how well is the body managing the stress, and actually what impact is that inflammation having on the body as well. So that's probably, and then vitamin D can be useful to know from a immune point of view, immune system point of view, to see how well somebody is able to absorb and utilize vitamin D. So yeah, we look at that as well.
So would vitamin D levels come up in the bloods as well, so you can see how much?
It depends on what you've ordered.
Okay.
So what we are seeing, I'm not saying this is for every NHS practice, but a lot of people that I refer to the GP for their blood tests, they're not doing vitamin D. Okay. And that is because it's generally, as a consensus, felt that most of us are probably insufficient. And so the government do recommend from September to March that we all take a vitamin D supplement. For those of darker skin, they actually recommend it all year round. I just like to know, well, how deficient is someone? Because they might need, within therapeutic doses, I'm not talking about going to like excessive levels of vitamin D.
Yeah, because you can go the wrong way as well.
You can go the wrong way with supplements. And that's where, just as a side note with supplements, I'd always recommend actually speaking to somebody, because you can go too much. Yes. So that's why testing can just be useful to see actually how deficient is someone. Is this something we just need to be looking at for a few months, putting in some supplements, perhaps a higher dose than the government recommendations. But I have been trained to do that. So it's not just I'll just tell you whatever I fancy.
No, exactly. Because it's quite low, I think, isn't it? Am I right in saying that in terms of it's, because is it recommended through hospital intake and looking at their vitamin D levels, rather, which is generally going to be low because they're not well?
Yeah.
I mean, so I was listening to another doctor at some point and saying it was actually to have 1 hour of good sunshine creates about 6,000 IU of vitamin D in the skin. And
Depending
that's what we
on,
should be
I
looking at.
guess, the individual's ability to absorb and convert, and the color of the skin. Have they got sun cream on? Because that will obviously block, has potential to block absorption. So there's like lots of factors within that as well.
There is a lot, isn't there? Because if you think, excuse me, vitamin D is naturally what you have in the stomach. So, and vitamin D is needed in the kidneys. So you can sort of see how the deficiency can suddenly really flare up from a kidney symptom during winter.
Oh, completely. It does make sense when you start to put it together.
Yeah. And it's just intriguing in terms of, so what foods would you sort, because I mean, we talk about supplementation, but
Sure.
again, if your body's in heightened stress,
Hmm.
it's not necessarily going to always absorb as
Hmm.
well because
Yeah.
the system's depleted. Is
Yeah.
there, I mean, would you have like a stage program in terms of, okay, right, how do we take us off this stress and start supporting, the body, the kidneys to start functioning properly?
So in terms of the stress system, what would I be recommending?
Yeah, I mean, what would be your first call to action for somebody that can do like now? They're
Yeah.
literally listening to us going, crikey, yes, I've got this going on here. What would possibly that they could do this very moment to go,
Yeah. Gosh, there's so many things. So, so let's start. Do you know what, the simplest thing that I try with my clients is get them to breathe. I think that's probably one of the main places to start, is that taking that time to ground yourself, breathing, and just moving from that fight flight into rest and digest as much as possible. And just where you can, really trying to reconnect with your body and sort of do a body scan and go, okay,
yeah,
where in my body? Because I think sometimes we're heavily in our minds. I know that that's been my issue over the years. And we can kind of not, it's like the warning signs that our body's trying to tell us. So sometimes as we reconnect and breathe and just take a moment to go, okay, what are you telling me, body? Things can pop up that can help us to identify actually what is it that I need. So it could be that you're feeling thirsty. By the time you're feeling thirsty, you're already needing a drink. Have I drunk enough water? We know that the kidneys need proper hydration. So making sure you're, having a good amount of water to drink. There is such debate about how much water we should all be drinking per day. I would say if you've got really dark coloured urine and you're not on lots of B12 supplement, a lot of B vitamins can just make the urine a funny colour.
right.
Your urine should be reasonably tinged. It's not like clear, but has a bit of
Got
colour
a
to it.
slight coloration.
Slight
Yeah.
coloration, straw coloured. That's it. That's the word I'm looking for.
Okay. Yeah, and
Straw
that's
coloured.
really important, isn't it? Because there's so many things that people can get bombarded
Yeah.
by what I should be doing this, I need to be doing that. And the key is like what's going on with your body,
Yeah.
what's right. So if you like you say, if you the indicators of dark urine, you need to drink more. And I mean,
Yeah.
I generally will have a warm water in the
Yeah.
mornings with
Yeah.
some lemon
Yeah.
and a little bit of rock salt
Yeah.
in, because it's the electrolytes
Yeah.
which helps the body receive the water
Yeah.
and absorb it, which is key. It's one part of what the kidneys function do, isn't it? Is to
Yeah.
look at the electrolysis
Balance. Yeah.
of the body, which is what we are, aren't we? We're electronic,
Yes. We've
energetic
got
beings. Yeah.
our charges, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, just before we did this, started recording, I shared with you, it's like, I feel like I'm a little bit all over the
Yeah.
place, and it's missed because I hadn't started off with getting up early in the morning and starting to do my self-care, my grounding, walking
Yeah.
the dog and stuff. So I feel like I'm chasing my tail a little bit. So I was kind of like, I just need to pause.
Yeah.
And I literally took my socks off and I went outside and just stood
Grounded.
for
Yeah.
5 minutes and breathed. And that's the pattern breaker. It gets us off the hamster wheel, doesn't it?
I think it's so important. It's even like little things you've mentioned there. The first thing, and the first thing I do is have hot water in the mornings instead of picking the caffeine. You know, caffeine is a stimulant. Research is sort of showing us we should leave ideally about 90 minutes before drinking caffeine in the morning to allow the adenosine, if I've said that correctly, receptors to flush
What's
out.
What's
So
that?
the adenosine receptors are in the brain, and they're like that sort of, you feel slightly groggy in the mornings. They need a chance to flush out. But if we put caffeine in, it can kind of affect that ability of that flushing out. So what you find is that, they don't have a full chance to clear, so then you need that caffeine hit. And actually that can be, if you're someone that has energy slumps in the afternoons, one of the things I do with my clients is actually, there's lots of things you can look at, but one thing is, how much caffeine are you drinking first thing in the morning, and is that having an impact on those sort of adenosine receptors? So, and then also you've got the flip side of water. Well, if you're dehydrated, that impacts energy slumps, that impacts brain fog, concentration levels. So if you're not hydrating, so actually by having the first thing that you do is just, because you've gone, for most of us, we'll have gone, 10, 11 hours without something to drink. I just think off the top of my head, I probably stopped drinking about 8 o'clock at night.
I need to stop at 8, otherwise I'm up in the night needing a wee.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So you've gone a while without water, and we can, fasting food is fine for that long, but actually, you can go a while without water, but it's important that you get up and hydrate. It also helps the flushing out process, if you think about it, flushing out the toxins, the bacteria, just kind of get it out.
That whole letting go, and it's like the start of the day again, isn't it? It's like, okay, what do we let go of? How do we start the new day? And that's physically, emotionally, mentally, isn't it? So it's like, what happened yesterday, don't have the hangover, the emotional hangover of yesterday, and break that pause, flush out water, emotion. This is why a morning self-care practice is so important, isn't it?
It's so important. And I know myself, like you've said, if I haven't done my morning routine, so for me it's slightly different. It's Bible reading, it's prayer, it's journaling, it's moving my body, because it is that, without looking at my phone. So I've actually got on my phone that I can't have anything until 7:30 in the morning. So I think I've got a couple of, like, my messages are allowed to, in case there's anything that's happened overnight, because my phone's downstairs, just in case there's like an emergency I need to pick up. But I'm not allowed to play on my phone till at least 7:30. So I've had time to not let the world impact.
Really important. I found myself last night, and I know full well, so I started my self-care routine, bath, Epsom salts, water, everything. Right, I'm gonna have an early night, magnesium on the soles of the feet, just to kind of like, phone, started scrolling.
So
And then before I know it, it's like 11:30. I'm like, oh my, and this is why I'm today all over the frigging place. Because I've then not wanted to wake up because I'm groggy and I'm tired. And it's just, so again, so the word popping into my head now is discernment. Hugely discernment and boundaries, which is actually what the kidneys are about. They're discerning, what do we let go of? What do we need to return back into the body? Because they do return back, don't they? So it's just recognizing we need to look at where we're putting our energy, what we're allowing in, like social media is just, it's just a bombardment if you're not careful. And I love the fact that you've got that practice that you don't touch your phone.
I need to. So my sleep, so it's a sleep mode on my phone is from 9:30 at night to 7:30 in the morning. And I think I have 4 apps. So a Bible app that I can, if I want to, my calendar, my messages, and my phone. So if anything happens urgently overnight, somebody can still call me.
Okay.
But
I'm going to do that.
I can't access social media. And that means, because, if we go back to, the adrenal health and cortisol levels, we know that blue light disrupts melatonin production. And obviously, when we're in periods of heightened stress, cortisol works against melatonin. So obviously, melatonin is your sleep hormone. cortisol is your stress hormone, and they work opposite. So the aim is that your cortisol levels are higher in the morning, lower in the evenings, and melatonin does the opposite.
Yes.
That's what it needs to be. But if you're in this position where perhaps your adrenals are in that state where, you know, you're in chronic stress, there's constant cortisol being produced, you can get that sort of dysregulation picture. So then you sort of find you're like tired and wired, and you're not able to sleep as well because you've got this imbalance. And then it's trying to make sure, okay, what practices can I put in place that's not going to add to that? So things like, you know, taking the blue light away. So that's why I've decided from 9:30, because then I've got at least half an hour of downtime. What are you watching on telly as well? You know, if it's the news, you know, the news is such a funny one. I know that it's important to be informed, but I think it's such a balancing act, because if you're watching the news straight before bed, you get yourself highly anxious because of everything that's going on. And we've also got to remember the media bias that we're also being fed. We do have to look at that.
Yeah, capital F, fear, isn't it? It's like we will bombard you with fear and make you feel out of control, which will stimulate those kidneys.
Yes. So then, you know, we then end up in this loop. So it's, you know, things that you've already mentioned there, Gemma, the Epsom salts, the bath, the magnesium on the soles of the feet, that's all calming. And often when we're stressed, we deplete magnesium and B vitamins, more, you know, more readily than when we're not. So it's all these things that combine. There's so much when we, you know, look at stress and adrenal health. There's so much to it.
Yeah, it's huge. It's a huge topic.
It's a huge topic, but a fascinating one.
Definitely. And I think there's so much, and you can come at it from different angles, I think. And this is why I love the physical, the emotional, the mental, the energetics of it all. Because, okay, you can look at it and go, okay, I need to supplement or improve my food. But then if you've still got the whole stress, emotional stress, conscious and subconscious, and then deeper still, the unconscious, which is rattling around in the autonomic nervous system, that it has even bypassed our consciousness. So trauma for me. So I'll share my journey a little bit, just because it may be relevant for others or resonate. So, you know, there's been childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And some of it actually has only recently come up to light, because I believe is actually we transition and as we hit perimenopause and menopause, things are coming up to be seen, to be healed, especially as estrogen drops, the veil around the brain isn't as protective, so things start coming up. But anyway, so I just felt that for me, kidneys have been what I would class as my weak spot, my energy that needs it. So I've struggled with bladder infections, things like that, UTIs. And interestingly, COVID, when that came along, that went straight to the kidney area. Interestingly, that seems to be a marker for where your point of inflammation is. It's like a inflammatory dye. So yeah, it's been about how I can nurture. And winter for me is about really trying to restore myself and not push, because I'm really feeling this fear of not being enough that pushes me to try and keep doing, as well as the finances stress as you get that bund on top as well. And I can feel like a real resistance, like the brakes against each other, which is creating that heat and that friction in my body. So it's this cortisol that's pushing me, but my body's like, I don't want this. I need calm. I need to rest. And if I go against it, I create more cortisol.
And that's the issue. I think we do need to, you know, take that again. It's that step back and listening to the warning signs, and also recognizing, I think, that there's a place for all these different things. So we've talked about food and supplements, but also trauma. You know, maybe you need some trauma-informed coaching, or counseling. You know, there's all these things that come together and create different levels. But I think if you're feeling that sort of overwhelm, burnout, the brakes, I love that analogy, the brakes almost against each other. I think it's so important that you take a step back, because pushing doesn't actually do you any favors. And if we look at hormone balance, you mentioned there the decline in estrogen as we get older. Actually, if you look at how cortisol is made, there's a precursor hormone called, I'm going to try and say this correctly, pregnenolone.
Pregnenolone, right?
And then you've got cortisol and the sex hormones. So in times of high stress, cortisol will always be made a priority over sex hormone production. So even from its simplest form, if you think about it, if you're constantly in high levels of stress, when you are in periods of high hormone fluctuations, whether that's, puberty, pregnancy, perimenopause, even times of the month, if we think of it from a monthly cycle, it's not just, the lifespan, it's the monthly cycle.
Yeah.
You're going to
even
have
your day, probably.
Yeah, probably even in our day,
Yeah.
up and down, or the rest. If you are feeling that chronic stress, then the cortisol will be made, which then you find the other sex hormones aren't going to be prioritized. So then the imbalances occur, and we start to see worsening symptoms of hormone imbalance. So actually focusing, I know we sound like we're talking a lot about stress, but there is so much that goes on within the body, and just concentrating on the adrenals. And the adrenals can get, I know there is this term adrenal fatigue, and there's a lot of argument over is that a correct term. It's mostly used sort of within the not within conventional medicine, that they don't use that term at all. But the idea, I think, that the adrenals can fatigue isn't quite correct. It's more that you can get a desensitization of the cortisol receptors, so the ability of the cortisol to do its job as well as it could do.
Oh, so does that mean that you're just on this rabbit run of cortisol?
Yeah.
So a bit like insulin resistance, you start creating even more cortisol. I mean, I felt like I've had some peculiar cortisol addiction. Like I will not deliberately, consciously create, but my time. Like I will suddenly do other things, which I know don't do that. You don't have time to do that, but I do it, and then I'm rushing to the next. I get there, but it's not a nice experience. And I do that a lot. And it's like, how do I feel like I'm addicted to sometimes the cortisol.
Do you know, I think it was a Mel Robbins podcast I listened to, and she addressed that concept. Are we addicted to stress? And I do think there is, I know myself, I can have moments where, like you've just said, you're in that constant cycle of like, I need to like almost burn myself out. And where does that come from? Is it that innate, I must please, I must be seen to be busy? If you grew up in an environment where rest was seen as being lazy, or you felt like you had to achieve, or you had to be hyper vigilant, or you had to constantly achieve to be seen. Sometimes it's hard to do that, to recognize what is my driving force behind this behavior. Sometimes it's painful to look at that, but sometimes I think if it's a constant thing, we do need to take a step back, and we can do all the practical things in the world, but sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes we do have to actually sit and recognize what is the driving force behind all of this.
Yeah. And I mean, that is certainly the work that I've done for myself, and I support others, is like, what is the undertone? What's the driving force behind why you think and why you do? And is it fear? So we're back to kidneys, or is it love? Is it a space that you're not enough? You fear persecution? What is it? The fear of separation? What is really sitting underneath us? And from a spiritual, whatever you want to call it, are seeing us individually and collectively being called to move through our survival patterns and to come into thriving.
Yeah.
And it's to look at everything that blocks us, all the fear, all the illusions that we talk, you do your prayer, whether we want to talk about God or the divine. It's like there's this energy, this consciousness, this source that's within us. And the illusion actually is the separation of that we are all separated and we're all different. And actually we all come back to the same essence that has
Mm.
created us,
Yeah.
which as soon
Yeah.
as I say essence, that feels like the kidney. It feels like
Mm.
that is the chi force. That's for Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
We inherit that from our parents. That
Mm.
it's that point. So are are we lost in some way in our spirit, in our soul?
Mm.
Are we in the right direction? Are we going in an alignment that is actually serving us, or is it an old pattern that we're still
Yeah.
living through?
I mean, that's a very valid point. Sometimes we do have to recognize, I know how to do it for myself, what is driving this? And I think, if it is fear driving it, it's okay, I need to address that. I need to look at that and let, that whole notion of letting go.
Yeah. But also knowing that that fear isn't the truth. It feels so friggin' real
Oh,
because our
the
body
safety
has
officer.
gone, body's gone ping, brain's gone, yes, I understand, it must be real. Okay, so the body then comes back to it and goes, and it's just this cycle that's just repetition, isn't it? Maybe be the HPA axis, the hypothalamus
Yeah.
pituitary adrenal axis, that
Well,
it's
you're
breaking out.
fight or flight. Well,
Yeah.
you can get to that freeze mode. Um, you, you're in that constant activation. That's the issue, and you're in that constant safety officer mode, as I call it. So nothing feels logical, and the body is just constantly trying to make itself safe. So you will go back to behaviors that, whilst aren't, even simple things like grabbing chocolate. Okay, I don't want to eat the chocolate, but my body wants to eat the chocolate. But the body wants to eat the chocolate because, from a logical point of view, when you've got lots of cortisol, you've got more kind of glucose uptake. And so that impacts glucose regulation, which means you're going to probably be on a blood sugar roller coaster, which means you then are going to need to be eating things that are more sugar because in order to balance you, because your body's trying to balance things out, even though it's the wrong thing for
And
the body.
once you're on sugar, that's
Yeah.
another cycle that we've already sort of touched upon, was like the insulin resistance, isn't it? And how do
Yeah.
you break out of that? So it's interesting you're saying that now, because it was literally as I was saying, I felt like I was all over the place and had to go and ground myself.
Yeah.
I had this instant need for having something like a milky drink. And I'm like, why am I suddenly craving something milky? And it's like, oh, it just took me to being an infant,
Yes.
where you would have suckled and had milk
Mm.
and to have had that in your stomach to feel, oh, safe.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
that's like one of our primary needs, isn't it? As a baby, what we're crying out. And it just suddenly dawned on me. It's like, oh, is this again about finding my body needing that reassurance, that safety?
Yeah. And so it's how we find, I think, safety in new practices. And I think it is recognizing and not shaming yourself.
Mm.
So, this morning, you've already talked about you hadn't quite taken time to do your self-care straight away. And I think when we have moments like that where we perhaps don't do things in the way that we want to, it's not shaming ourselves, because as soon as you get into a shame spiral, then we're in
Yeah.
trouble.
Yeah.
But it's just acknowledging, do you know what, I didn't quite get it right this morning, but I can still do what I can.
Yeah, that is, I mean, self-sabotage is definitely never pattern that I've been working through, because it's like I'm not good enough. It's the whole not good
It's
enough, isn't
not
it?
good
And
enough.
I'm
Yeah.
just going to get the cat and nine tails and just give myself a hard time. It's like, and shame is like the lowest vibration we can carry, isn't it? It's like the same, it's actually the same frequency as lead.
Is it?
But
Oh,
it's,
I know that.
no, it's literally, so yeah, each emotion has like a
Okay.
frequency which can relate. So love has the
Yeah.
same frequency as gold.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting. Now we're talking about metals, heavy metals, getting the metals out of the body. So it's anyway, I'm diverting slightly, but it's more to do. I could just, my brain, you can see woo, my brain says la 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 la. But it was more about just stop, just
Yeah.
take a breather, and you can stop this hamster wheel now
Yeah.
and just draw a line on it. Not give myself a hard time for being sucked into my phone last night, looking to nonsense, and going, I appreciate I shouldn't have done that, but
Yeah. Completely. Like, I don't get it right. I didn't manage my self-care routine this morning, and I've just gone, do you know what? It is what it is.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I will be different.
Yes. And it's just bringing in little steps, isn't it? And I think this is a real key thing, is not to think self-care is something you just go every so often. It's
Yeah.
something to build up
Yes.
every day.
Yeah. And I think, we can get ourselves so overwhelmed with, trying to do it all at once. And I think it's recognizing that every step you take is a step forward.
Mm.
And actually just have grace for yourself. None of us get it right all the time. I'm a professional who understands what to eat, how to, if you think about my 5 pillars of mindset, nutrition, sleep, reducing stress, and I've forgotten my 5th. But there will be days where I don't do all of them. And, you just go, okay, why? And then I figure it out and I go, okay, well, tomorrow will be different.
Yeah. And I think because kidneys can relate to brain fog, because it's all to do with balancing the pH of the blood, the CO2 and the O2. And so things like brain fog can be quite an easy and a symptom that can come up from that, which and the other thing was as well was infertility as well. It was the fact that we've sort of skimmed around it, haven't we, in terms of the hormones and the estrogen levels, how, because there's too much cortisol.
Yeah.
And if we're too much in fight flight, then the body hasn't got the rest, feed and breed. So infertility can be presenting itself, or menstrual imbalances, can't it, from the kidneys?
Definitely. Yeah, or just for hormone imbalance. Yeah. So it's always something to consider, I think, with individuals who are experiencing infertility. It's looking at those sort of hormone balance. But also, I mean, oh gosh, yeah, I mean, that's a whole different thing. Fertility, I could go into so much more.
That's another podcast.
That's another podcast about what to look for. Which, I live with infertility, so it's something I constantly have to look at. Well, we're kind of coming to the end of our journey on it, but I don't know if you can ever come to the end of the journey with infertility, but you know what I mean. So
Yeah, I guess it's acceptance, is it?
yeah, accepting that this is our story and we've done all we can, and done lots of work on the stress system and the hormone balance and the but yeah, sometimes just doesn't. You can do all the things and still doesn't work. So yeah.
No, it's which again comes down to that how you can connect into yourself, isn't it?
Yes.
To be with that.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
definitely.
I think so many things happen in life, isn't it? And it's how we can find that everything that's thrown at us is to find that inner peace in some way.
Yeah. However that looks, for me, it's my faith. Just that ability to find that peace is really powerful, I think. And being able to just connect with something bigger than ourselves, for me, is just vital.
Yeah. Because sometimes you can just question, what on earth, why is this happening, can't you?
Yes.
And which comes to, if you have that more soul connection, your spiritual connection, you can come into more place of trust, trusting the process and acceptance, and just also know it's not just you that has play in your life, but the only thing, the more that you can do to discern what is aligning to you,
Yeah.
what do you absorb, what do you give your energy away to, what do you want to feed, what do you want to bring, isn't it? That's really key. And
Yeah.
I'm just thinking now, like, as we're talking again back to kidneys and
Yes.
winter health, if you look at nature,
Mm.
it's gone through the whole autumn of like
Yeah.
letting go, the lungs and small intestines, which relate to them. So we've gone through the grief. It's really deepening still again. What do we need to let go of? so we can come into the spring, into the new year with actually what we want to bring to life. What do we want abundance? What do we want to bring to fruition? And do the weeding, isn't it? It's like, what crap, what weeds have I got in my head and body that I don't want to bring into this new year, that I no longer want to carry? And then equally, what seeds do you want to bring life to?
Yeah. And that's where I think, we talked about this last time, having the ability to rest and be still and, not rush around. I think we like to be busy. There's a need to be busy, I think. And actually, this time of year, there's just such value in when you can just, not being as busy, just taking the time to process. And if you need to do that with a professional, then I would recommend you do that, because some things are hard to process on your own.
I think it's really important to have somebody to hold you through these processes. I've done a lot of work on my own, or I have brought other people in, but it's me being kind of looking through the mist and the dark with my own little lantern, trying to work out where to go. Whereas if someone can hold you through that space, that you can feel safe, that's when the journey unfolds, isn't it? It's that deep sense of safety in the body, which again comes back to kitties. Oh, how can I feel safe? How can I feel supported? What do I need to let go of that doesn't align to that, doesn't align to my joy? And so it's really about this another level of discernment, isn't it?
Yeah. But that, there's also, that can take a lot of energy. So sometimes you need to start with quick wins.
Yeah.
So what are the quick
Breathe.
Breathe.
So what can we do? So we can take a deep breath.
We can take a deep breath.
Let's do it now. Let's just do a deep breath now, okay? So let's do this. Okay, so what I do is I bring my hands to my heart, because I always feel like that for me is about bringing in that connection. Oh, instantly, I just take a deep breath. And now I focus on my hips and my seat bones. So if you're seated, obviously if you're driving, I'm just going to put this right here now. Don't do this. Or pull over. Only do this when you're not operating heavy machinery. So yeah, just tune into where your seat bones are.
Yeah.
And just for now, what I do is try and relax my perineum, which is, for those that don't know, it's the tissue between the vagina and the anus. And for men, it's just between the anus and the groin, basically. So, and that is like our connection to earth. So the softer we can make that space, the body goes, okay, I'm safe. I can relax. So I like to bring attention to the hips, see if we can relax, breathe into that. You might sometimes have to tense it to then be able to relax it. And then bring your attention to your feet. Again, our feet are always communicating back to us. Are we safe? Because it's the connection to the ground. So if we can soften our feet, tell them that all is well. I am safe, I'm supported. You can just bring in that calm. And I need to appreciate I'm doing a podcast, but I could just sit here. Oh my God, this is what I need. But so that could be the first thing, is like bring your hands to your heart, soften, connect into your body, and tune into those key parts of your body, just to say, let's just call in some safety. Let's ground. I instantly feel calmer.
Yes. It is such a quick and easy way.
And it's in hand there, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so maybe when that quiet moment is like, okay, what aligns to me now? What do I need? What course of action? And is that action no action? Is it just rest?
Just rest. Yeah. Allowing it's okay to rest. It's not lazy. Just think about the benefit to your kidneys.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, I'm just thinking what else you can do with the kidneys is really, I mean, I think the fundamental part is get the emotional state. Then you can bring in the physical support as alongside it, can't you? And professional support like yourself to be able to really understand what's going on in the body. And but I also like a bit of castor oil with a heat pack. They like heat, kidneys, don't they? So just keeping your lower back warm is a nice one, and hydrated. So
yes, hydration is good.
anything else you think you might want to throw in there as a self-care tip?
Sleep.
Yeah.
Get your sleep in. And yeah, I think focusing, which is probably the theme for most things in life, on whole foods.
Okay.
You
So what do
know,
you class? What do you say whole foods? What does that really mean?
fruit, veg, nuts, seeds, meat, fish, dairy, pulses, reducing processed foods, ultra processed foods. You could say bread, even bread made in it's like with 4 ingredients is still a processed food, but I mean the ultra processed foods.
Oh, well, again, you'd say bread. Bread can have either few ingredients or 20 odd
Yeah, so I
what you
mean like
buy.
bread with, if I make bread we have a bread machine, it's literally flour, salt, a bit of sugar, water and yeast. So yeah,
It hasn't got all these other preservatives that the body
no,
can't quite get rid
the
of.
body can't. Oh, and butter. Did I say butter? So, but anyway, it's not got chemicals that the body just doesn't know what to do with. So I think and also when you think about how the body needs to process these foods, it just doesn't know what to do with it. That's going to take more effort and energy.
Yeah.
Or I believe it does anyway.
No, it does. It's the
Just
whole, if
kind
it
of
doesn't.
sorry, carry on.
No, it's don't go, go.
I was just going to say, having things that the body's like recognizes and knows what to do with, and also has nutrients in it. A lot of these ultra processed foods aren't very nutrient dense. They might be calorie dense, but they're not nutrient dense. So it's actually giving your body the raw ingredients to do what it's designed to do.
So it's making the body have to work harder, use its energy resources that it hasn't probably got enough anyway, especially if you create with fatigue. And then it's not only is it not got anything, it's using the energy to try and digest it, and then it does get stuck in the system, which creates more toxicity. So yeah, really is a no-go, isn't it, this processed?
Yes. I mean, we can go there's so many things on that we could probably talk about, things like endocrine disruptors and toxins in the home. But I think sometimes we've just got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another one then. That's another episode.
Oh gosh, there's plenty of episodes that we can go through.
Reducing your toxicity.
Reducing your toxicity burden. Yes, that's we can go down some interesting avenues with that one, depending, there's lots of theories out there, but research is coming through, especially things like endocrine disruptors. And I've just been listening to, that's why it's kind of forefront, The Ultra Processed People by Dr. Chris Van Tuchelen. And I was listening to half of that going, I knew a lot of this, but some of it took it like even further. And I was like, oh, wowzers.
Yeah.
It's opened my eyes quite a lot to things. So yeah.
There's a lot that needs to change, isn't there, with the whole toxicity.
Yeah.
So, but it's looking at what you can achieve, okay, because that can create a whole load of overwhelm and then you don't do anything at all. So it's just, okay, look, just focus on the few little pieces that you can and then build it up. It's really important. So
that's the thing. I think, if you're getting overwhelmed, then actually it creates more problems. So it just comes back to what can you do, what can you control, and just doing little bits at a time.
Yeah. Which again brings in, have somebody to support you through that. because you know you need to change, but you just haven't got the energy, or you just fall into overwhelms quite quickly, then you need someone to step in and hold that and support you.
Yeah.
Not to do it for you, but to
No,
be able to
but
guide you through. Yeah. Oh, well, this is brilliant. Thank you yet again.
been a pleasure.
If people want to get hold of you, my darling, how do they do this?
Yeah, I'm at nourishtosoar.co.uk. Also on Instagram at Nourish to Soar, and you can find me on LinkedIn under Claire Thomas Devon.
Perfect. Oh, well, it's been beautiful. Thank you once again, and look after those kidneys. So,
Indeed.
take care.
Bye-bye.